Manuel, me ajuda aí a conter o som. Obrigado. Então, como eu estava falando, o Pablo Lazo, as minhas referências, ele é o diretor-geral da Arup Latinoamérica, que para mim é a melhor empresa de engenharia do mundo. E como vocês viram na apresentação, a gente tem a honra de trabalhar com ele e a sua equipe, tanto em New York como aqui no Brasil, nos projetos CTA e outras iniciativas do Mais D. O Pablo, como eu falei antes, ele é dedicado a estruturas multifuncionais e ao design arquitetônico e urbanístico multidisciplinar de larga escala. Ele já tem projetos realizados na China, África do Sul, América Latina e Europa. E é minha grande honra introduzi-lo para o Keynote Speaker, agora da volta do Coffee Break. Bem-vindo, Paulo. Uma salva de palmas, por favor.
Good afternoon. My Portuguese is not good, so I have to do this in English. Also, Pedro asked me kindly to do it in English. Thank you, Pedro, Caroline, GSD, for the invitation to share in 20 minutes some of the work that I've been involved in the last probably 20 years working in Arab. I don't want to talk about Arab, but early this afternoon when the presentation of GSD came into the screen, it hit me that the founder of my company, who was an engineer from Denmark, who then went to the UK and created this great company 70 years ago, also had in mind as a philosophy, as an ethos to do good work, is to have the word design in mind. And why is that? Because he thought that if you really want to change the world in a relatively small scale or larger scale, you really have to understand the meaning of design and how to put together a team of people, work together to really explore, innovate, and discover what that word means. When Pedro asked me to come here, I knew the term landscape urbanism from several years ago when I was still in the AA, and I wanted to challenge with one initial proposition, and that's the first part of my short talk today, which is, in Arab, landscape urbanism equals infrastructure. And in cities, nowadays, infrastructure matters more than anything if you're trying to shape landscape urbanism. But let's start with one kind of theoretical proposition. I would argue that in Latin America, most of the cities nowadays face one big paradigm. The paradigm of planning cities, planning the future, solving future needs of people, and making cities. How cities have been evolved over time. Betty Franca, who was here before, shows some of the realities of cities like Sao Paulo, where really favelas are not only the clearest demonstration of making cities, but one of the most efficient ways cities are operating currently, despite the economic recess or economic backlash they have. They operate in a very unique and fantastic way. And I do believe that the challenge of urbanization in cities in Latin America for the next, I would say, 25 years, face this dichotomy: what to plan and what to make, what to leave for citizens to evolve and produce in other time. Now, let me start with a story 15 years ago. We were faced by this paradigm approximately around the year 2000. We discovered that climate change was going to hit us hard, and that climate change was going to hit us harder in cities. There was no clear evidence at the time, but there was one important report by this guy, Nicholas Stern, from the British government, who said we need to change the trajectory in the way we plan and make cities in something that he coined as green growth. Nobody knew at the time what does that mean, but everybody agreed that it makes sense because it had the word green, and it was ticking the boxes in terms of tackling and addressing climate change. We at Arab start thinking, okay, what exactly does that mean when we do large-scale urban projects, when we try to plan future cities or revitalize parts of existing cities? And we went to an adventure in China where the label of Eco-City was kind of a brand. Approximately 15 years ago, China economic growth was really pushing to create new urbanization models that would be successful not only economically but also sustainable and using all sorts of technologies to avoid fossil fuel consumption. And we took the challenge to understand what exactly green growth means when we do a design of a city. This city, it's called Wanzhuan. It was the second eco-city labeled in China. It was more successful than the first eco-city that we did. And it was successful for three important reasons, in my view. The first one was that the framework of the design of the city, and you could see that we learned from Brasilia, because the super block or super quadra of Brasilia is very, very important to understand good urban block composition, but that's another story. We learned that in order to create a new piece of city, one of the important elements is not to displace existing populations. And you can imagine that in a country like China, where democracy doesn't really exist. If there is a Chinese here, apologize, but that's a fact. And we had 25 agricultural people living in that land that we didn't want them to displace to another piece of land. So we had to learn and we had to adapt the design to incorporate agricultural use into the land use qualification of the city. That was the first learning. The second learning was how to introduce new technologies in terms of energy renewables, water supply, waste management, and all those things that nowadays for all of you are very common and you have heard several times, but at that time, 10 years ago, was completely new to understand how those systems could be put together. And the third one was exactly how to understand the relationship between those systems so that this project, this design, would really be successful in the long term. So here is a snapshot of a plan where you have a river. It was existing. The river started to become an ecological corridor, so it acquired several functions, not only channeling clean water, but also creating a new wild habitat, creating pieces for urban agriculture, becoming a flood defense for the system, and so on. The depiction of that image only conveyed a fraction of the systems that we had to go through and look to understand their interrelationships and to come out with the best possible outcome. It was not a 100% success. Some of the things were turned down by a client, some of the things were turned down by local authorities, that in China, as in Brazil, as in any part of the world, you face the challenge of conceptions and not wanting to adapt. But what it really revealed us was that there was a methodology embedded in the system thinking approach that also Pedro mentioned before that had to be studied in more detail for future urban projects. And this is exactly what we did in Arab, starting to work with the several academic organizations in Europe to understand what exactly does that mean, the system approach to city planning. And we start with reading probably the most seminal work on systemic thinking that is started in the late 1970s by an American ecologist called Donella Meadows, who understood that by applying systemic thinking to city planning, you could understand more clearly what are the pros and cons of any decision that was going to be made by policymakers or by designers. And that by looking at that system on its totality and their relationship, if you wanted to address, for example, something like energy efficiency, there will be some impacts, positives or negatives, to other elements of the system. And you had to understand which are those impacts and how you're going to mitigate them. That really led us to the methodology that we have applied over several years now in integrated city planning within Europe, sometimes very successfully, sometimes not so successfully, particularly because there is a huge behavioral change that has to happen in authorities to really accept this model. And the fundamental change is really avoiding the silo thinking. So it's really avoiding that the transport secretary stop thinking only at transport issues and start thinking that transportation issues is also something related to quality of life and something that is more important for sociologists, and so on and so forth. How does that apply to a city? Well, this was the conceptual framework applied to a city block. You can imagine any city block, generic, in any city in Latin America. And the way we try to distill that is, well, you have several layers. And each layer has to be taken into consideration when you receive, as architect or as engineer in Arab sometimes, a commission to plan a block or a group of blocks within a city. And those layers are equally important, no matter if it's related to land use and architecture at the top, or is going down in the layer system to waste management, transportation, water, or energy, are equally important. And the more you integrate and you try to address them, the better the outcome in terms of efficiency for that city block in particular is going to be. What that really adds to the city is that if you multiply all these blocks, and bear with me that it's a very generic shape, it's not any city, it's not a specific city, but if you add a series of blocks like that, with all the solutions embedded in the design, what you're really creating is a new economic model for the city. You're really creating a city that, instead of being a burden to the population and the politicians, is an asset, because the city will work better. And that was one of the questions we asked 20 mayors in 2010 on the C40 summit. And we said, is your city an asset or a burden? In other words, are you carrying a big stone trying to solve problems of your city, or are you thinking that you have to invest in your city to make it a better place for your residents and your workers and your visitors? And here are 3 examples of cities that answer, the mayor answer, is an asset. The first one, London, East London, before the Olympics, 1997, East London had the lowest social income, the highest social income inequality with West London since the Second World War. Part of the solution of the mayor to regenerate East London was to create a new metropolitan center in Stratford City that later became the seat of the Olympics game. And after the transformation of the Olympic Games, East London is now recovered economically and with a new shape to incorporate more people, more citizens, and distribute better wealth in the whole London. Second example in New York, that's the longest public open space after Central Park. It's 13 kilometers long, walk on the Hudson River. That project started within the community. That project did not start with an authority saying, I want a new public open space. It started with a community saying we need to recover all those piers, transform into a linear park, connect Lower Manhattan with Upper West Side, and create a new connection route for pedestrians and bicycles. And 13 years later, that is the result. It's still a public and private project, real. There is no buildings, there are no real estate elements, no architecture, it's only landscape and infrastructure. And the third one, believe it or not, I do believe is Rio de Janeiro. Because no matter how successful is the whole plan to revitalize the center of Rio, just the operation of bringing people back and putting a transportation system close to the water is going to create a huge catalyst for that city in the years to come. That was the only project we did not work in of the three that I showed you. But I'm convinced that that is a demonstration of how mayors, political elements, political figures address and accept that cities can be assets for the future. Why did I say this? Well, this is research done again inside Europe that shows on the vertical axis the billion of dollars of investment cities have to make in infrastructure. Parks, roads, cycle paths, sidewalks, etc. Drainage, energy supply. And on the horizontal is the year span by which, after they invest a certain amount, the life cycle of those elements started to be replaced, and therefore the cities need to invest again huge amount of money. What that research showed us was that you have a band between $2 and $3 billion for a city-sized Brasilia, 3.5 million people, that if you keep investing constantly that amount, that city will have assets through a 20 years cycle. If you don't invest that, you're going to start to have problems that are affecting your quality of life, your citizens, for residents, and for visitors. And there are cities, of course, in Europe that also are able to invest much more money on that. What that really showed us was that if we invest in landscape infrastructure in cities, you really create a city that is going to be more resilient and is going to be an asset for the future population. How are we applying this? Well, I want to show you two examples. The first one is in Barranquilla, Colombia, a city, and if there is a Colombian here in the audience, will probably have heard. That city has the lowest ratio of green space per capita in the whole Colombia. It used to have 0.7 square meters per capita. The previous mayor, with the support of federal government, said, well, we want to change that in Barranquilla. How to do it? Well, we start working with them, and we realized that they had several systems disconnected in their city. They have transportation and accessibility systems such as new cycle paths, cycle lanes, new public transport routes that were not really linking primarily public open space, ecological reservoirs, pocket parks within the city. And we discovered that if we knot them together, they started to become a real network of public open space, green space, and therefore they would achieve a higher amount per capita of public green space. That was just the first layer. And that was done really by a multidisciplinary approach of people looking at transportation elements, people looking at corridors that are used by small channels or rivers, in Portuguese, corridors, that you could enlarge them, create an ecological path, and then create links between the major parks or metropolitan parks. And that operation for us, it's something that we call spatial reasoning. We can only do it applied to a territory of that scale, of the metropolitan scale. It cannot be done at the city scale of Barranquilla. We had to look at adjacent municipalities. And that was the first time in Colombia, if there is someone from Medellin here, can tell me otherwise, but I think it was the first time that several municipalities joined together on an integrated strategy of this kind. The second element we discovered here is, okay, we're talking about public open space, we're talking about parks, we're talking about small squares. But what does that really have to do with people? Well, Charles mentioned this morning, you have a correlationship between where you put parks and potentially public health. And we discovered in this project that if we start to apply and collect information from diseases such as obesity and the sugar, diabetes, you could tackle those areas where there is a higher population at risk of those diseases, and that's where you're going to put more parks and more walkability elements to the landscape and the public open space designs, so that people start to do more exercise, and therefore you can try to reduce those diseases. And that's exactly what we did. Now, this is not a simple operation, because you have to collate data from public health services. Here in Brazil, Sao Paulo has the only database, and it's not 100% completed, it's 70% completed, of where are those population at risk areas in the city. No other city in Brazil, in Latin America, there is no other city that has that database built in. But if we do that, if we convince city officials, if we convince politicians that they need to do that, that can be a great resource to really plan public open space in a way that it's really affecting human health. The second element we learned on this project was that it's so fundamental to start with the process of participatory urbanism. And you mentioned it, and I think it has to be distilled to no matter what scale of city, you have to engage people. With the technology you have now, all the citizens can be participants of the debate, discussion, and a more democratic process of design consensus. In Barranquilla was particularly fundamental because we had these municipalities not aligned. And therefore, we had to bring them aligned before we move forward with the plan. And the only way we could do that was doing this process of participatory urbanism, putting platforms online so that people from different municipalities came together and select what they really wanted to do with the elements of the urban strategy. And the third element we learned was that urban intelligence and technology now is so cheap and available that we cannot avoid accepting that that is going to be part of our design process in the future. That is at $15 each sensor that measures air quality, noise, and you could tap in a sensor so you can put it on parking locations to send a signal to a control center and tell drivers where is a free car space in the city. $15 each. It's nothing, right? And you solve three problems. You measure air quality, you measure noise quality or noise pollution, and you help drivers to find a car park space in the city. Why we don't use more of those things that are available, those gadgets? I think it's fundamental. We think that as part of our design process. In a bigger city, in South Africa, this city is exactly the same size as Brasilia, 4.5 million people. It's the city that used to be called Pretoria. Now it's been relabeled Shani after the liberalization of the apartheid. It had a big problem. The city center, everything that is around inside that green loop was empty because all the city officials left, so everything was abandoned, was vandalized, was not properly managed. So we were asked to draw a plan that would tell them, the city officials, how to start regenerating that huge city center. And as you can see, the plan is incomplete. And that is the whole purpose, or that was the whole purpose of our exercise. Leave elements to the unknown, because we cannot really plan the whole city regenerated in the horizon that we were given. We identified elements where the city had a little bit more ownership of the land, where there were some private investors interested in putting something new, or whether there was a very important ecological or connectivity element at the wider city scale that it was important to reconnect or rebalance. And that's all what we did. We didn't complete the plan, and by the way, the client was very annoyed with me when I said, that's an incomplete plan, sorry. And there were two simple layers to that plan. One, to tell them where to invest the money they had. So there was an area that they wanted to put more governmental office. That's where we concentrated, where we put more residential and social housing. That's another element. And then there was another element of a huge market that in African culture is fundamental to the exchange of culture and traditions, so we had to reinforce that. And the rest was simply a plan to infrastructure. In this case was transportation. That was the only way we could connect all those three dots, by a new system of infrastructure, which in this case, it was a new corridors of BRTs and another series of mini taxis pathways. This is to show you that there are very simple operations, but complex in the process of transforming and shaping the future of cities. And that sometimes they end up being very simple and could be perceived by you as reductionist, but in reality, they have behind a huge level of rationale, research, and technique behind it, and data to really come up with that simple proposition, or what is appeared to be a simple proposition. In Foz do Iguaçu, in Brazil, we were asked to look at, and Beta is here, at the Plano Director, and we said, sorry, we don't do Plano Directores. It's very difficult to understand. If anybody here can explain me what is a Plano Director in one word, I would invite a beer. Otherwise, I think it's totally bad. So we said, what we will do is something, again, for you guys that are doing a master's or coming out from Harvard or other school, I know master plan is a horrible word. I agree with you. But sometimes that convinces clients in real life that if you do an integrated master plan, you're going to try to solve many problems, even though if you don't solve all. And what we say to the city of Foz, we said, well, you need, if you really want to do a master plan, you need 4 key items. You need a new governance model. Forget about what you're doing with your plan director. You need public participation, strong, embedded in the process. You need, of course, plans and projects, and you need your baseline. And we work with the baseline of the bid just because they have been working with the bid before we started. And this was the initiation, the beginning of the long process that we have been in the last 2 years. You can imagine how difficult it is to sit down on the same table a Paraguayan, an Argentinian, and a Brazilian. Well, that's exactly what we did, because we look at Foz do Iguaçu, which is in the border of 3 countries, is well known for the waterfalls, but in reality, it's a fantastic territory with binational relationships all around. And if they don't accept that relationship ecosystem, they will die economically, because the park can only accept certain amount of tourism. The dam, the Usina at the north, is not really attractive as a tourism destination. It's more attractive to cross to Paraguay to buy cheap stuff, and you have 500,000 trips a day of people crossing to buy a watch, an iPod, or a TV, and then come back to Brazil. And then you have the Argentina relationship with the park on the south. So that was the first step of a long process of saying you need to look at an integrated territory. You really need to look in the wider picture, not in your plan of director of your whole city. And we started with the city center. That was the most important outcome of this project. That after that huge exercise of large scale, metropolitan scale, we went back to the city center and we told them, look, start working with your city center. You have a lot of land available. You can capitalize and transform that into an exemplar piece of city. And we're working that with them on 3 different aspects. It's in Portuguese, apologize for the English speakers here, but the first one is to create a new tourism platform with several offers of tourism within the city, not only the waterfalls, to put it simply. Health, there's a huge potential for health opportunities, health retirements, spas, and health and well-being in English to be located in that park, but also have the possibility to create a plan that is more resilient in terms of economy and not being fully dependent for tourism only. You had to produce a plan. At the end, I would argue with everybody, we are architects, we're urbanists, engineers, we always have to produce a plan to convey that message to our clients. And finally, I want to leave you with these 6 themes that we have been working on all these projects that I show you and a few others, and they always interconnect. There is no way that we can only focus on one, that we not discover that that one theme that we thought it was the main theme is starting to affect the others. And I would encourage you to think on a wider scale, not on a city scale. Brasilia is not only the Plano Piloto, it's a conglomeration, it's a metropolitan area. And if you start distilling that conception of metropolitan scale, I would argue with these 6 themes, there is a better future for our cities in the long term. Thank you very much.
So that was great, and it's great to see